All right. Hello. Welcome to episode 4 of the Immigration Podcast. I am Rob Ratliff, an immigration attorney based in Cleveland, Ohio. And here with us today also is.
Susan Hiller, based in, I'm based right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, or in South Carolina.
And so all of our contact information will be at the end and at the beginning of the video. So let's talk about immigration. So, Susan, what's going on in North Carolina? Anything fun?
Well, I know there was a podcast 2 podcasts ago, before the one with the judge, and I said they weren't picking up people at that time in the immigration court. Oh,
Yeah,
that kind of changed like the day after we did that podcast.
really.
Literally, yep, it's almost like they watched the podcast. So they started uh, basically doing the dismissals and trying to dismiss the cases and pick up people in the Charlotte Immigration Court. And there were lots of, people worried about going to their immigration court proceedings because of that.
Yeah, really. The I just got a thing from Ohio, Ayla, and I don't know if you've seen it down there or not, but the uh, in Omaha, OPLA DHS attorneys in Omaha had started filing motions to pre-termit asylum based on that asylum compact agreement with Honduras. So they filed a whole bunch of motions to pre-termit in asylum cases, indicating anybody that came after 2019 not eligible for asylum in the United States, they have to go to Honduras first and apply for asylum there. So just closing
Okay,
cases
can
and
you
shipping them
explain,
out.
for the audience, can you go back on this, I think, migration point that they're telling them to go to and explain what assurances Honduras has given, if any, to
None.
not
None.
these
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this goes back to 2000, a little bit before 2019. We entered into these asylum compact agreements with a couple of countries, Honduras being principal among them. And the agreement basically says that asylum or Honduras will take anybody that wants to apply for asylum and have full asylum hearings there. So per that agreement, and under U.S. asylum law, if it's the last call at a bar, right? You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And if you have any other third party country that you can go to and be safe, then under our rules, you can be forced to go there. So this Honduran asylum compact allows Honduras is basically saying we'll allow you to come here and apply for asylum. So we're using that to indicate to the immigration courts that these people, anybody that came after 2019, not eligible for asylum in the United States because they're eligible to apply for asylum in Honduras. So before they can even come here, they have to show that they're eligible, that they've applied for and not been granted asylum in Honduras.
Not to everyone, even if they came to the northern border.
Anyone, and not even if, doesn't even matter if they're from Central or South America or wherever they're from. Anyone that came after 2019. So
Okay, so
you have to make
this
that
is the
choice.
same Honduras. I'm sorry, Rob. Is
No,
this the
no,
same
yeah, it's the same
Honduras?
Honduras where they're killing everybody.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. This has the highest murder rate in the Western Hemisphere, I think, right?
The Yeah, I think like it always shows up as like the second or third worst country in the world for women.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, and
Yeah,
women
like
are
right
definitely
behind
viewed as
Guatemala, and
there.
yeah. So that's been going on in Omaha. I've seen some of the copies of some of the motions that have been filed and cases that have been uh, pre-terminated, which basically means uh, uh, closed by DHS. So
I
that's
don't
a
know how
interesting
I don't
wrinkle.
send someone to Honduras, especially what we know about Honduras.
Right.
I mean, it's
Well,
the
and I think too.
drug trafficking haven. It's a human trafficking haven. It's a sex trafficking haven. It's one of the largest per capita murder rates in the Western Hemisphere. Um, I can't think of I can't think of a worse really country in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, Haiti's obviously, a mess right now because of the instability and the poverty,
Guatemala.
and Guatemala too, of course. El Salvador,
Yeah,
they can have a mega prison, but the mega prison actually just shows that they are abusing people's human rights more than anything else.
yeah,
So um, it doesn't matter. They have all these rich people moving in and showing that they can have, an oligarchy there. That doesn't mean that you're free.
yeah. Well, and I think from a practice standpoint, if you've got a client now that entered after 2019, I think you've got to not only file in your asylum application why they have a fear of returning to wherever they're from, but also why they would have a fear of returning to Honduras. For most cases with women and children, I think there's ample evidence in the record, but for men, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to show some specific reason, why they can't go to Honduras. But with just all the femicide and the child trafficking, I mean, I think those things are clear in State Department reports and in other documents. So just one more thing to add to
I
your
find
asylum
it
app.
hard to find. That is true. And Sudan. Apparently, you have to write
Hmm.
Sudan also, um,
Yep.
because they can remove you to Sudan. Um, so I'm finding that finding the country reports is difficult for certain years. They've scrubbed the internet of them, and also for religious freedom reports as well.
Hadn't looked
I
at
don't
the
know if you.
religious freedom reports recently, but yeah, luckily I've kept all the back reports from the last 20
Oh,
20 some years of, so I've got a lot saved in my hard drive, so hopefully we can make use of them.
that's excellent. So I'd like
Yeah.
to hear more about your case and bring us up to speed on your case, because it's pretty much a good example of what's going on in America right now with immigration.
Yeah, and with the uh we had a very nice article in Rolling Stone this last week. The author there did a very nice job kind of covering everything that was going on. Right now we're still in immigration court pending, the de novo review of the asylum application from USCIS. Now that that's been terminated, so we're still fighting that, and we'll eventually
Just for
have a
people
trial.
for people who are
Oh yeah,
catching
yeah,
up,
I
just
should
from
catch up.
his name.
Yeah, Ayman Solomon, and Ayman was or is, but was an imam at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital. He was part of their chaplain program in residence, and he came to the United States in 2014. He was on a visitor visa. He was granted asylum by USCIS back in 2018, and the conversion from asylum to green card he's been fighting essentially ever since. And the weird timing thing on the case was December of 24 in the prior administration, USCIS issued a notice of intent to terminate that asylum grant. And then in June of 2025, they in fact did terminate that asylum grant after a very short hearing. I think the transcripts from that hearing are 4 or 5 pages long. The actual termination decision is about two pages long. So that gives DHS a second bite of the apple and lets them have a de novo review in immigration court. They've been successful in denying bond based on jurisdictional grounds because they're alleging material support of terrorism based on the nonprofit. He was a member of he was a board member in a local nonprofit group that supported orphans, and they've taken 3 or 4 steps of assumptions and indicated that, well, somewhere down the line, somebody in that nonprofit group drove women to the polling place, and those women voted for Muslim Brotherhood, and Muslim Brotherhood's a terrorist group. So uh,
Yes,
that's
God, it's not
yeah,
anymore. It was,
no,
it's not designated.
no,
Yeah.
no, and so where we're at is we've filed a habeas action, we filed an Administrative Procedures Act action as well, and that remains pending in federal court, trying to challenge the basis of the termination and why the termination was improper. There's some jurisdictional issues there, and I admit there are, and we're trying to argue to the court that they should exercise jurisdiction because of how egregious the errors are. But we've also have a habeas file challenging his detention and the custody determinations, and that's pending. The judge did grant the restraining order to keep him in the district so that we don't have to deal with him being transferred all over the country. And we'll
Is that like
ultimately
a
fight
temporary
that in.
restraint?
Yeah, yeah, and that's been renewed several times now. So we'll keep him in the district, and we'll prepare for the asylum trial. But there's just nothing that we're getting traction on in the immigration courts with respect to the mandatory detention. The immigration courts are just rolling over and playing dead for DHS on anything DHS says on the jurisdiction issues, on the material support. So and interestingly, the material support allegations were in the original notice to appear for against Iman, but we filed objections to them, hoping to get to a master calendar where we could contest those allegations. So DHS just removed them from the NTA. They just issued amendments, removed the material support, so it takes away our ability to then contest those prior to the hearing. But then they go ahead and use those anyways as a basis to deny bond jurisdiction. So they get
Still
the
their,
best of both worlds.
still their burden. I'm not sure how they were able to
Yeah,
meet their burden in the bond, except that you said the judges are just doing whatever they say, which to me goes back to what George Pappas exposed as a whistleblower, that the they they are losing their independence to make their own decisions, and the pressure is on them to do. They were pretty much being told, um, rubber stamp what DHS says. So what you're feeling is actually what is going on. They actually have been told to do that. I'm not really quite how this even plays with Chevron deference being gone. Like they're giving the agency all this Chevron deference that doesn't exist, right? DOJ. That's what George was trying to say, is the DOJ was told to go along, do whatever DHS says. So in essence, like I, on two notes on that, what scares me about that, um, for almost all of us, but what scares me about that for the immigration courts is, being an assistant chief counsel previously, I relied on the immigration judges to make sure, I obviously came with my best expertise, but I liked having that check and balance. We're supposed to check and balance each other. I check and balance the judge and make sure that the judge, is, I can advocate what the law is, but my advocating for the law is supposed to be advocating for the truth and justice, not to win. It's the law is followed and that the precedent published decisions are followed. I mean, yes, there is some policy that, does play into the way the agency views things, but it shouldn't be a 180 from what the law actually says. And the other thing with that again is like I'm supposed to check and balance the judge to make sure due process is followed for both sides, but the judge should be checking balancing me to make sure I'm correct, because just because I say it doesn't, as a former government attorney, does not mean that I'm 100% correct. We're all apt to make errors. So we're exactly. Oh, wow. Okay. Were they really, really bad people? See, the thing is, we don't even know if they're really bad people because in your case, I think you're about to tell us, I think you were telling me earlier that they're claiming that your client has arrest warrants that he doesn't have. So we can't even believe. And that's sad because I used to work for the government. Like it's taking away all the credibility of the federal law enforcement and the attorneys for the government. It's sad. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, just to stay alive in your country, you paid a little cart, a fee for your little fruit cart to exist. Yeah. Um, it's really sad. You brought something to my attention that I just want to say, I think I always knew that, as a government attorney, I had this massive power, but I used it responsibly because it is so, the federal government's power is, it's massive, it's extreme, and it's very hard to compete with the federal government when it's making a claim against you unless you have a lot of resources and, a good support system, and not everybody has that. So it scares me for these people because a lot of them are going to not get due process because they can't afford an attorney. And if fictitious claims are made against them, how do they defend against them without um, an attorney? Right. You can't. Not only can you not, I mean, hearing some of these horrific detention conditions that we would, when I was an assistant chief counsel, we would never allow. But I mean, they're with, a mass group of people. I mean, I do understand at the border them sleeping on the floor, but that was for supposed to be temporary for a day. But sleeping on floors, uh, not being fed, some of them. I mean, depending on where they're located, but they're not going to give them the phone time that they're afforded or the computer time that they're entitled to. Never mind, it's they're not going to give them the amount of time that they need. Mhm. 12,000? Wow. And wait, Ayla? I'm sorry. Oh, Ayla, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying Opla, opposite principal. Leader. Yeah, they're, I don't have any detained cases at this point, but I had a criminal one previously, and I found it extremely difficult to prepare that case. I found that uh, that particular federal Bureau of Prisons or whatnot, and that was in Cleveland, or Youngstown is where he was detained. They wouldn't even take a thumb drive for him to go through the discovery. They wanted a disc, which if we're talking about danger, I would think a disc could be made into a knife or shredded easier if that's what it's about. This individual, not a violent, wasn't charged with a violent offense whatsoever. Technically, he should have been released even when I, you know, um, had to withdraw from the case because, it comes to a point sometimes they need a federal public defender. Things get expensive, and even the federal public defender said to me it was clearly discrimination, that they shouldn't have, and this was a federal district court, but they shouldn't have said that he was a flight risk based on his alienage alone. And I agree. She just said that they usually aren't so blatant with it, with the decision the way it was. They usually try to mask it up. And I guess my point on that is just a detained case. It's very difficult to get together with your client. It also makes it difficult for them to work and financially support their family, and you know an attorney, yeah, an attorney, unless the so it's it's extremely that's that, that I don't understand that. Right. It's a lack of due process, and for those who have suffered, this has got, imprisonment might actually represent post-traumatic stress disorder syndromes, and trigger uh, a lot of trauma, that past trauma. So this isn't something that we normally do unless someone really is a danger to the community, like truly a danger. It's also it's a tax. It's taxing on the taxpayers. It's extremely expensive. I mean, I know it's probably more expensive now, but it used to be about $132 a day to detain somebody in immigration custody. And you're talking about 55,000 beds, which is, I think, the most we've ever had. And they want to increase that. Their goal is to, my understanding is for every single case to be a detained case. They want a completely detained docket. They're hoping that people will not be able to afford an attorney because of that. They will give up, and the cases will go so fast. I mean, basically to deny them due process, so they give up and go home. Go home. They're home. They think they're home, but a lot of them, their home is here. Their kids are U.S. citizens. They have U.S. citizen grandchildren. they may have a business, they have a whole community that loves them. These are not criminals. Not yet, but I do have some overmove. $2 million. Okay, wow. $2 million. Now now going to be going through crypto assets and Bitcoin. Yeah, well, and assuming they get this, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but assuming they get this based on these new laws, where's this money going? I'm just curious. So that back to the tax, right? Where it's going? It's not coming back to the tax. More detention beds, more police state. Yeah. Oh, no. That's what they did with the criminal matter that I had in federal district court. That was it. So his wife actually moved to the community, got a job in the community, and that still wasn't enough. Like he went to school in the community. He went to school in the community, but that apparently wasn't enough either. Because okay, assuming arguendo, everything they say is true, which they have every right to have their due process and have their case in court. If that's true, they are basically running for their life to get to this country, whether it's through a visa they already had or one they were able to obtain, and they came legally. I mean, mm, well, well, they're not. They're also you too. Yeah, it sounds great, and I look forward to hearing more about your case and that you're allowed to talk about. And yeah, and I'll get you some new developments as well for the next podcast. Thank you, Bob. And until